Welcome to the Extra Podcast, a production of Northview Community Church in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Your hosts, Jeff, Ezra, and Thaleia, will be discussing the Bible, relevant issues, and current events each week. At Northview, we love to study God's Word and discuss how it applies to our lives, but we try not to take ourselves too seriously. So feel free to laugh with us and at us as we try to challenge and encourage you in your faith.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Extra Podcast. My name is Thaleia. I'm one of the pastors on staff, and I'm joined by Jeff.
Hi, Thaleia.
Our lead pastor at Northview, and Josh Amazonas.
Hello.
Josh is our producer here. And Josh, you have like the best last name. Like it's on my top 10 of best last names.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's really cool.
What are the other ones on your top 10?
Well, Sawatsky's pretty good.
Yeah,
it works.
pretty good.
Amazonas,
Yeah.
Sawatsky. What else? You like the long, detailed ones.
The Greek last names are pretty good.
Yeah.
I feel like they're always...
Well, see, I grew up with the last name Taves, which looks like toes. So then you add Thaleia, which is complicated, to toes, which is brutal. So when we
that's not on your top 10.
No. So when we got engaged, I told Mark, I said, I don't know if I can take your last name just to mess with him. He was so upset. So we had to work through that. But I knew all the way along, I'm ditching my last name. I'm taking Sawatsky.
I have a friend named Brian Hurlbutt.
Oh, yeah. That's bad.
Is that a good one? Is that in your top 10?
Top 10 worst.
Wow.
Poor guy. He should have changed it to Hurley.
Oh,
Like the brand name. But whatever. You can tell him.
Yeah. Okay, I will.
Yeah.
I'll tell him that one of the pastors of our church has mocked his last name.
See, so we already got started on my question of the day, which is pet peeves. So just to get us warmed up, let's continue with pet peeves.
Thaleia, people who know me well know not to ask that question.
And I know you well,
I have
which
a
is why
list,
I'm asking the
laundry
question.
list. Here's my pet peeve for today.
Yeah.
You already heard one already, which I will not bring up because we did it before we made this podcast.
And we'll do another podcast on Jeff's pet peeve that he recorded before this one. And I told him no.
So here's my pet peeve. 4 words.
Yep.
ICBC. That's my pet peeve.
Relating to the people.
Honest to goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Do you have a history with ICBC?
No, I don't understand socialism. I think it's silly. I think it's silly that you are somehow providing car insurance to everybody in the province. Why not let the market determine this? So now, because Josh can't drive, my rates have to go way up.
That's
So
right.
that because we all have to guarantee his insurance. Maybe we shouldn't guarantee Josh's insurance.
No.
Maybe Josh shouldn't be driving. Maybe he should be paying $1,000 a month if he wants to drive.
On my intern salary.
Yeah,
Here we
totally.
go.
But the rest of us don't need to do that. And what's wrong with a little bit of competition, for goodness sake? I've lived in I don't know how many different states and how many different countries.
good.
And
It's
this
expensive.
is the worst.
Yeah, it's really expensive.
Or
And then
even-
they ask you the same questions whenever whenever I renew it. I say, yeah, nothing's changed. Are you sure? Like what? What? I'm not on trial. Yes, I'm sure.
That's
Are you
fun.
sure? Is it pleasure use or is it business use?
yeah.
We define pleasure by this. What? Stop it.
That's funny. Okay, give us another one, Jeff.
No, that's enough.
Okay, Josh?
I just honestly, I'm gonna get.
You're gonna get
We're
going.
applying for Canadian citizenship, and now probably that just torpedoed the whole thing right there.
Don't
Because I
don't
said
tell
something about ICBC. Actually,
don't tell anyone this podcast.
Actually, I think that it's a sign that you are a Canadian citizen if you hate ICBC,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
Like even people who aren't. Who do
I
you
know
know who
nothing
likes
except
ICBC?
ICBC.
Well, British
That's all I
Columbian,
know.
right?
I've
But
not
even
had
people,
competition.
I don't know anybody who's like, yeah, ICBC. The people who work for them are like, yeah, they're
sucks,
horrible.
yeah.
It's the worst ever.
Okay, Josh.
I would say, just because we're coming out of winter, I hate specifically that people drive faster in the snow because they're like panicky. That like gets me every
get home,
time. What are
gotta
you
get home.
doing? Just go a little bit slower.
Yeah, we should insure them.
I don't
exactly.
like 50 kilometers an hour on Downs Road. We're teaching our kids to drive, and Mark and I would have this argument every day. Mark's like, they have to follow the speed limit.
Yeah.
I'm like, 50 on Downs is driving me crazy. Do you see the list of people,
Yeah.
the cars behind us
I would
because my
like
kid's driving?
all the police officers who are listening to note that Thaleia does not like driving the speed limit on Downs Road.
I know.
So.
Seriously, I break
Her
the law
license
too
plate
often.
It is one of the places in Abbotsford, though, that if you're going to set up a speed trap, it's the spot.
Yeah.
Because honestly, especially when you go down the hill there, there's
Yeah.
all the kids going to school, all the moms getting them there.
Yeah, all the late people.
the MEI traffic.
Totally.
Honestly, you could make don't they have like quotas? For the cops, I don't know if they do, but you could make your quotas just on that road in an afternoon after MEI.
I better start driving with the speed. I'll be screaming in the car.
I've wanted to at times put one of those radar things up, like the speed radars near our window here.
Oh, would that be
then
funny?
you could get the. But then I thought I'd get cancer in the head or something.
Yeah.
Probably. Any more pet peeves?
Oh, I got a lot.
Okay.
But you know what? It's not time for that.
Okay. Next time then.
That's its own thing.
Okay, so this podcast, we're going to talk about Jeff. We're going to do behind the scenes with Jeff. All kinds of questions that people want to know.
Surprise.
Yeah. Josh put together a list with the young adults, I think, right?
Yeah.
And then I added to it some of the things that I know that people want
By
to
the
know.
young adults, you mean like him and
No.
Like
one
two other
friend
people.
is like,
No, there's like
What do you wanna
there's like
ask?
20 people. Yeah.
So first of all, some fun facts. Jeff, tell us some of your worst foods.
oh, broccoli, cauliflower, peas, cooked peas. I can eat the one, in the bean kind of peas, snap peas, what do they call those? But they have to be raw. If you cook vegetables, you've ruined them. I don't I think I can do
Carrots?
No, that's ridiculous. Why would you cook a carrot?
No cooked vegetables?
No, they're disgusting. Like, well, unless you put it in like
Steamed?
a pot pie. You can put it in a pot pie and I'll be all right with that.
Okay, with some good flavoring around.
Yeah, but you got to soak that thing in gravy.
Oh
That's
man.
funny.
But no kidding. Jeannie asked me the other day, my wife asked me the other day, do you like all these people eating this, like, they're substituting cauliflower for rice? And I said, why would I do this?
Yeah.
This is absurd. This is a dumb idea. Well, it's supposed to be healthy for you. Yeah, but it's cauliflower.
And it's rice. It's
So
not
she-
like
so she
that
made-
bad.
So she made something with the cauliflower base.
Yeah,
and she
yeah.
said, "You try it." And I tasted it. And I said, "Yeah, okay. I don't want to throw it up. But at the same time, it still tastes a little like cauliflower." And my wife, she leaves cauliflower in our refrigerator and too long, and it stinks everything up.
Yeah, it does.
This should be. And have you ever eaten anything with broccoli that doesn't taste like broccoli? They always say, "No, put enough cheese on it, and it won't taste like broccoli." At which point, I want to say, then why eat the broccoli if I don't want it to taste like broccoli?
Okay, so what about
That
salads?
is funny.
No, I can eat salad. A lot of salads. Very happy.
Can you put like carrots and broccoli in the salad?
No. Yes, carrots, as long as they're not cooked.
Shredded.
You don't need
So
to.
raw?
No, raw carrots, cucumbers,
Yeah?
peppers. Happy with all that.
Okay.
But there's no reason for you to put
funny.
these root vegetables in things like that. Come on.
So what do you listen to in your car? You drive around by yourself.
I will listen to quite a bit of podcasts,
Okay.
and I listen to a lot of sports.
Podcasts for fun or podcasts for learning?
Mostly sports, and I listen to some theology podcasts. And in my better moments, I will listen to the ESV as it's read.
Yeah.
But I will listen to a lot of different kinds of podcasts. I probably have 8 or 9 podcasts that I listen to.
But are these ones that you're kind of trying to discern if they're good, or you think they're good and you're following?
No.
it?
I just some of them, I enjoy them, and then other ones they're okay.
Okay.
Do you want to throw out like maybe 1 or 2 good theology podcasts?
Ooh, a theology podcast. Well, some of the ones that I listen to, I wouldn't say are good. They're actually trash.
Not
but
those ones,
I listen
then.
to them because I think because they do cover some stuff that I just don't. I'm not
Well, you need to know
usually
about for
privy
your work.
to.
Yeah.
White Horse Inn's always been a really good podcast. Years. I mean, that's Mike Horton and his guys they do a really good job. Have done it for a lot of years. Gospel Coalition's got a pretty decent podcast that they put together. Somebody recommended the Happy Rant the other day.
Daniel
okay.
Markin.
It's okay. It's not great.
Okay.
It's like us. It's like this. People listening to me talk about stuff.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff's just silly. Although they do make some good jokes about Christian subculture and all that kind of thing.
What about music? Do you listen to music?
I do. I have a playlist. It's called Dad's Funky Fresh Mix.
Spotify or Apple Music?
Apple Music, but
Okay.
only because that you can listen. When we got Apple Music, you could listen to different. You could listen on different devices at the same time. Whereas Spotify, when we got it, wouldn't do that. So
Right.
we went with Apple Music, and now we stick with it.
So you wouldn't have a lot of free time being the leader of a church and a family.
Ton of free time.
But if you do have free time,
Play
what do you like to do?
Well, into this winter, I've started to play Fallout 4 again.
Nice.
Which is what?
It's a video game
Okay.
about post-apocalyptic Boston.
Is this
I've
zombies
played it several
and aliens
times.
and what is this?
Yeah, it's all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel connected to it because your family's from Boston?
I do actually.
Nice.
When I first started playing it, it was funny because I've been to Boston lots of times, and I'm like, oh, this is funny. You know where the different places are.
Yeah.
And, but I enjoy a good video game, but it has to be a kind of free roam type thing. I played some sports video games before.
Yeah.
But yeah, lately I've been like playing way too much of the Fallout.
Okay.
But my kids got me what they call the DLCs, the downloadable content on those, and so they're
Hardcore
two extra. They're like 2 extra whole worlds that you can enjoy. It's fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
What do you mean?
What else do you like to do in your free time?
I ride my bike, although lately not because of my knee and all of that, and the weather's been horrible. Even though I have it on a trainer, but I hate the trainer.
Yeah.
A lot of time spent following my kids around with sports, to be honest. Like most of my free time is spent doing stuff with my kids.
Yeah.
Yelling at referees.
Yeah, I haven't. My son didn't play basketball this year. It's only basketball that I really get fired up at, and it's because I grew up playing and I coached it and I officiated it.
Okay.
And so I struggle with all of that. Not the coaching so much, because I understand why a coach would do what they do. I don't think the officiating that I have witnessed has been up to the mark at times, and I have at times let them know that. Now, listen, you need to understand something about America. You know, Americans are brash and loud and stuff, okay? But we really are that way when we get into a gym with sports. So if you go down to the U.S. and you watch, say, a baseball game, which is not in a gym, of course, it's on a field, but if you go and watch a baseball game, a high school baseball game, the parents are just killing the refs, the umpire. They are just killing them. Doesn't matter.
Moral indignation.
Like, it's outrageous. And the whole game, nobody will get kicked out. And it's just part of the game. I mean, as long as you're not saying something that's like really harsh or mean or crosses any lines, and most people don't, but they disagree with the call and they say that. So that's the culture I grew up in. So even as a coach, when I used to coach basketball, if the official was saying something, was making calls that I didn't like, I would tell him so. That's absurd. You know, you need to knock that off. You're better than this. You know you're better. And I knew the names of the guys. Come on. I went to school with a lot of them.
Yeah.
Right? Come on. How did you learn that? We used to play basketball. You do that all the time when you play basketball and you say it's not a foul, but now when it's so you can say this sort of stuff and they laugh along with you, and sometimes they just say, man, just stop it. You're just mouthing off. You know, like there's a conversational thing going on. My experience here has not been that way.
No. That
you're expected actually to sit in the stands and say nothing. And so my only defense for myself is it's been a bit of a cultural challenge. So I've tried to adapt to Canadian ways, which is sit silently and occasionally say "yay" for our team,
not
or
too loud,
good
though.
try, or stuff like that. And so I've gotten better as time's gone on.
Yeah.
With that, this year my kids aren't playing basketball.
Your sanctification is
my kids aren't playing basketball anymore, so I'm not really that involved in that kind of thing. But like you have to understand, it's almost like if you had for your whole life been, doing a particular thing in a particular venue and you're thinking there's nothing wrong with it, and then all of a sudden you go into a new place like here, and all the rules, kind of the expectations culturally are different. That you're like, I'm not allowed to.
Yeah.
Because the people next to you are like, why are you saying, like, why? What, am I not supposed to say anything? Like, I've sat next to people before, and they've kind of freaked out, like, wow, you're so embarrassing. I'm like, but I overplay it. I'm not really very loud.
Yeah.
But I've used all sorts of resources to try to not do it. I'll wear headphones and like, listen to music loudly, so I can't.
Funny.
But in order to, there are some things you can't not see. Yeah. Right? So like you're like, oh, that's terrible. Oh, so
Did you ever have any like sport dreams as a kid? Was like sports ever an option?
Yeah. I grew up playing all sorts of sorts of sports.
College level ever?
Oh no.
No, okay.
No. I played tennis. I was actually a bit of a tennis champion, 12 years old. I was like I won several tournaments and was involved in all that kind of stuff.
But then
he found God. Tell us a little bit about your early years being from the States.
I was born a small white child, and
what do you know?
Where are you in the birth
Boston
order?
area.
What? How many siblings?
Well, I think I'm probably like 18,700,000,000 and I don't know where the. Oh, you mean my family?
Your family.
Yeah.
Come on, Jeff. Work with me here. People want to know about your early years.
I'm the youngest.
Okay.
Yeah.
The baby of the family.
I have 2 older sisters. Yeah, one 1 year older than me. She was adopted, and one 6 years older than me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of activities did you have to do as a kid that were good,
I
and
had-
which did you have to do and that you hated?
Well, you have to do some chores and stuff that I
Yeah,
didn't
no,
like.
I mean like extracurrical activities, like
Oh,
did you have to do
going to see my
piano or
sisters, anything.
sports or-
Like, no, I had
Yeah.
to go and watch my sisters. They were both really into horses.
Okay.
So I used to watch them like do their horse thing if you've not been involved in the horse thing, you watch them brush the horse, and then after they
I've
brush
not been involved
the
in horse
horse,
thing.
they put like
I
a
know.
bridle on the horse. And then after they put the bridle on the horse, they lead the horse out into an arena. Then they sit on the horse on different kinds of saddles, and then they lead the horse in a circle.
Really exciting.
Sometimes the horse speeds up when he's going in the circle, and sometimes he slows down.
Wow.
Riveting
And
stuff.
and then they're judged based upon Lord knows what. I don't know.
You didn't
But
have to do horse things?
At the end, somebody ends up coming out and saying, "You were first, you were second." They give them a ribbon. Then they come back and they brush the horse again. And then they go out shopping for like $1,000 saddles. Honestly, the whole thing.
So how
Listen,
come
if
you
you're
didn't
into
have to do
horses, I
horses?
totally get. I do. I get that they're majestic animals, and I understand. There are people I know who do barrel racing and all sorts of stuff like that, and even dressage. My sister was fantastic at this. Like she was. I think she
But
was
why
in a
not
national
you?
championship.
Why
and
didn't you
stuff like
have
that.
to?
Why didn't I have to ride them?
Yeah, horses.
Because I
Why didn't you have
hated
to? You hated them?
The horses and I had an agreement. And that was, I won't get on them
Yeah.
if they don't defecate
And your,
near me.
and your parents didn't make you?
No.
Well, see, like I had to do piano
No,
lessons, right?
my mother was very kind to me.
Okay.
She knew I hated the horses.
Okay.
And so I would only have to go every once in a while to the horse shows. And we would watch the horses go around in circles and stuff. And it was just, honestly, those of you you don't know how hard this was before cell phones.
Yes, true.
Like, there's nothing else to look at
Yeah.
or smell. It's just the horses going around in a circle. And you're like, oh. If I didn't, you wanted to stab yourself in the eyes a few times.
That's funny. What else did you have to do as a kid?
Mowed the lawn. We actually live in an acre of property
Okay.
in Issaquah, which is the east side of Seattle. It's kind of one of the places I lived in. I also lived in Redmond and Bellevue over there. But the property that we had was about an acre. So I had to mow the lawn on a riding lawnmower. I was not very good at it. No, I would leave big spots and stuff, and then my sisters would come along. My sister, a year older than me, would come along. She'd have to fix all this stuff and get angry. Why can't you drive straight? So
Jeffrey.
yeah, yeah. We had a lot of animals
Okay.
because my sisters liked the animals. We had dogs and cats and rabbits and gerbils and never any snakes or anything. My sister had birds at one point. Like if you could, she could find it barely breathing on the side of the road. She'd bring it inside and recuperate it. Yeah,
So did
give
you
it a
grow up-
name.
Did you grow up going to church?
Yes, we did, because everybody went to church in the 1970s, in the 1980s in the
Yeah.
United States. So that's what you did if you wanted to be an upstanding citizen.
Okay.
But as far as like meaning it,
Yeah, tell us about that church.
not really.
Your
When
early
I say,
church experiences.
when you say that church, there's, I remember lots of churches
Okay.
that we would go to, lots of different kinds of them. And
So you
then,
didn't have like one
Well, I
that you were
think we
kind
went-
of part of?
We'd be part of one for like a year,
Okay.
and then go. When you say be part, and then finally we were part of a church plant,
Okay.
actually a Presbyterian church plant, and then that was for a number of years. But that was really when I was in junior high school, and it was not my cup of tea
Okay.
at all. Yeah, like church was not a thing I liked at all. Doesn't mean that I wasn't like. My sister was going out doing all sorts of. My sister, a year older than me, was going out doing all sorts of crazy things. But I was not that. I wasn't that kid. I just didn't dig it. I thought
So
it
when
was
you-
sort of a waste.
When you look back at those early years, like in your childhood and teenage years, when you look back, what kinds of things shaped you to be who you are now?
People, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The reason I came to faith in Christ was largely because I was involved at a camp that my sister got involved in, kind of out of a series of weird providences. And then I went to camp there, came to faith in Christ there, and went back every year. But then I got in with a guy who he mentored me, he discipled me. Ken Hutcherson was his name, in the Seattle area, and just go to his house when I was in high school every Monday night. It was really when I came to faith in Christ. It was kind of late junior high, and I remember going to his house every Monday night for what they call the discipleship group. I go to the youth group, and then I go to the discipleship group on Mondays. And my goal in the youth group was just to meet girls, right?
Totally.
Classic.
And
Classic.
well, and also to tell a couple jokes, get a few laughs, and then I'm sure I was completely irritating. I think about people who are like me now and go, "Oh, Freddie, yeah." But then it took. Like, I mean, I went to this discipleship group, and the Lord got a hold of my heart, and I was very much engaged in that. And Hutch took me under his wing. There's a group of 6 or 7 of us. Most of us are in ministry today. So about 3 or 4 years in his house every Monday night.
And so then when you went off to college, what did you study?
I was gonna be pre-med. Wow. And then I took calculus, and it happened at the same time.
Broke you.
Well, the calculus
course.
classes happened at the same time as my intramural football team
Tough
played,
decision.
and so I chose, of course, football.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of a funny story. At the end of the term, I said to these 2 guys, I was living in the same dorm with them, and I said to them, they were part of this calculus class, and they knew I had gone all term, and they said, so anyway, I picked up a book with the book, and I was kind of going through it, and I went up to their room and said, "Hey, so this one part, here's what I got for the answer." And one of them said, "Yeah, that's right." And I said, I'm feeling really good about the final." And the guy said, "Dude, that was like the thing we did the first week."
Oh,
Oof.
shoot.
I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, like that. There's a lot more than that." He said, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, it'll be fine."
Uh-oh.
So I got to the final, and there was
Josh
a bunch
and I
of
are
questions.
cringing.
I think
Yeah.
I've told the story before.
Yeah.
I got to the final, and I remember there being a question about a train and
Yeah.
distances and stuff like that. And there was 5 questions, and I didn't answer any. I drew a picture of a train on the back,
Nice.
and I handed it in.
Partial
I handed
marks.
it in about 30 minutes in, because honestly, I went through the 4 or 5 questions, wrote a few numbers down, and I was like, "There's no way I can do this." And it occurred to me at that moment, I'm going to fail this class. So I drew a picture, and then I thought, well, I don't know why I'm sitting here waiting. I might as
Yeah.
well just turn this in. Gave it to the TA who was in the front, and he looked at it, and he looked at me, and he shook his head. That's all he did.
It's a
He just shook
bad
his head,
drawing of a
and
train.
I just shrugged. I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, it is what it is.
What
So
a-
I failed. So whenever I when first year college students don't do well in school, I usually understand a little bit about it.
What was your perspective of your future after that?
Well, I thought I was gonna do, like I said, pre-med, and then I stopped that, and I didn't really know what I was going. I actually transferred that from the University of Washington to Western Washington University up in Bellingham. So I was in the Seattle area, and then in Bellingham, and that was a really good move for me. It was a smaller university, still about 12,000 students, but it didn't feel like a city.
Yeah.
And I got to know some guys who I lived with on a floor in my dorm who, in God's providence, I was surrounded by Christian guys. And we really became like brothers, and it was fantastic. We lived together the next year, or 2 years. The next year we lived on another floor, and the next following year we lived in a house together. So at the time, I didn't really know what it was that I wanted to do. I just remember when I went to Western, I remember thinking to myself, you know what, if I'm going to do this, the only way it's going to actually work is if I do something that interests me.
Yeah.
At this point, in the States, the expectation is you get a bachelor's degree.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter what you do it in. But so I liked history, and I was pretty good at communications. So I started with a communications degree because everybody said, "Oh, that's the easiest one," and I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that one." And then,
Sounds like most of the young adults we know.
yeah, I found I was good at it, but then I started taking a couple history classes at a professor, Leonard Helfgott, who was, in his own words, a Jewish atheist. And I didn't know what that meant, but he was a great teacher, man. He was so good. And I loved his history classes. So I would sit into his class, and then there was a couple other guys, George Mars, a few other guys who I just started to love their classes and love history. And so I found myself, all my electives were going to history. And so at the end of almost when I went in to see the counselor, like, what do I need left to graduate? And he said, well, dude, I have to be honest with you, you have all your stuff, you have history and you have communications, you have double major here. I was like, really?
Nice.
Okay. He said you could, yeah. So I did that. And so that was my major, history and communications. And they're useless, both of them. Right? They don't do anything.
Useless.
Okay,
You
but
don't
then
use
you
those
graduated
anymore.
with...
Well, I do now, right? I had no idea
Yeah.
at the time that I was going
No.
to use them for seminary, but like
Yeah.
at the same time, or for
So then where did this call to pastoral ministry come in here?
my father-in-law, who's a pastor at the time,
Okay.
I got a phone call because I married my wife 6 months before I graduated.
Okay.
And now like a couple months before I was graduating, I didn't have a job and I didn't know where I was going to go. I thought maybe I'd be in the U.S. Foreign Service because I was like, oh, history and communications will work for that. You know, like being in
Yeah.
a consulate somewhere. Didn't really want to do it. And my father-in-law, I remember where I was. I was, I was on a stairway actually at where my wife lived at the time. Yeah. And he called me and he said, so do you want to be a youth pastor? And I was like, he lived in he was in Eastern Washington State, like in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, yeah, I don't got nothing else to do. And he said, like, seriously, it's gonna, the youth ministry here is not, it's in the middle of nowhere. Church's not huge, but there's some potential for it, and we just need somebody who's going to come out and at least be a good influence because the last guy was a hot mess. And I was like, yeah. So I went out and interviewed. My gosh, they interviewed me for hours, asking me every conceivable question. And at the end, they decided, oh, we'd like to give you the job. And they said, we'll pay you $22,800. And I was silent. And then I said, well, we'll have to think about that. And I went out to the car. My wife, Jeannie, was with me. I got in the car and I said, we're rich. So jazzed. I had never made anything like that before. And in those days, that wasn't very, by the way, don't get thinking, oh, back in those days, that was $1 billion. No. It was trash. But you know what? It was great. And I was there. And what a lovely little church in the middle of nowhere. And I was there for 2 years. I actually ran out of stuff to say. That's actually what led me to the seminaries because I was just realized I loved doing it. I'd worked a lot of places. I could tell you lots of stories about different stupid jobs that I've had. But this one was the one that I just felt like, this is great. I love this, even though the church is irritating and political and insular and weird and all sorts of stuff. The work was great. I loved talking to kids. I loved hanging out. We loved taking them water skiing. I loved going to baseball games with them. I loved just getting to know them. Loved teaching discipleship groups. And so, that's how I ended up getting into it. And then I just went to seminary because I ran out of stuff to say.
So let's jump to now a little bit. What's it like for you being pastor of Northview, large church? What's it like for you and your kids and Jeannie? Lots of
when
people
you're
ask
asking,
that.
what do you mean? What is it
Well,
like?
a lot of people ask about you, and they'll say, what is it like for Jeff being the lead pastor of this church? What's that like for his wife? What's that like for
Unexpected
his
is
kids?
the answer to that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
It's unexpected because I never thought that I would ever be in this sort of role. First of all, if I were making decisions about who should be pastors and who should not, I would not have chosen me for that particular role. Mostly because I just thought pastors were people who like to wear khaki, and
She did.
do you know what I mean? And penny loafers and hold their coffee and say stuff like that. And I'm just not that guy. As you well know now, Thalia.
I do.
Well, I'm pretty driven,
Yep.
horribly opinionated. Yes, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Very meek and mild.
and just very committed to care a lot about doctrine, which I guess puts me in a really good category for that. But I always thought that I would end up being in the classroom. So pastoral ministry has surprised me that it's been something that I've ended up doing. If you're asking the question, so I'm answering a question, what's it like to be a pastor? And for me, it's surprising to be a pastor.
Yep.
I'm always surprised that people in the community, like one of the real challenges I have as a pastor is that people here for some reason who have church backgrounds tend to treat you like you are different. Do you know? And they'll say funny things like, "Oh, the pastor's here." You know, like if you go to the baseball game and stuff, "Oh, the pastor's here." If you're if you're at the basketball game and you're like, "Hey, ref, that sucked," you know, like that's horrible or whatever, they'll turn and go, "That's the pastor. Did you hear the pastor say?" And you're like, "Well, actually,
say that?
I actually kind of care about my kids' sports too. Is that allowed? I'm allowed to do that? Because you get to yell and you get to be upset too. I care."
And we don't say, like, the accountant is
right. So I find it hard sometimes to live like that, especially with stuff that I don't think is, I don't think that it's out of the ordinary or sinful to care about my kids' sports or their education or things like that. And so in the end, I find it a little bit off-putting because people always want to have you, they always want you to be the nicey type. That's their picture of a pastor. Yeah. And as you well know, I don't really fit that mold. This is why I'm saying that I'm not sure that,
So what do your kids love about Northview? Yeah, you do a bit. What do your kids love about Northview?
Well, they love the church. That's something that my kid, whether it's Northview or wherever else, they love. That's one of the things I've been very thankful that my kids have caught the love that I have for the church, which, by the way, was not something that I had when I began ministry. I remember riding in a car with a guy who was a pastor, and he said, "What do you want to do when you get older?" And I was a youth pastor at the time. So, I think I want to teach. Whatever I'm going to do, I don't want to be in a local church. And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, politics and blah, 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 all sorts of things that I'm not a local church guy." He said, "Well, Jesus is a local church guy." Yeah. And I was like, "Hey, wait a minute, you." But he was right. Yeah. And he told me when he was sitting in the front seat of the car, I was in the back seat, he said, "You know what? I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray that the Lord gives you a love for his church." And that man's prayer was answered because I love God's church. It's irritating and stinks, and I'm not a church guy, right? And there's lots of problems with the church, and we're all sinners. And the problem with the large church is that you have more sinners. But there's nothing like it on the planet. And there's not a lot of other things I'd give my life for. So I love it. My kids love it. And they've caught that from me and my wife. Jeannie's a pastor's kid, and so she's already had kind of that DNA in her. Yeah. And so we love the church, and they love the church. It's hard for them, though, do you know? Because there's nowhere really in Abbotsford. I think it's 150,000 people. There's no really where I can go in Abbotsford where I'm not looked at. And at first I thought, "Oh, Jeff, you're just being paranoid." And then I came to realize, no, no, you're not. Because, our church is thousands and thousands of people. Yeah. And then on top of that, our Christmas Eve services, last year we had 7,500 people come through just on Christmas Eve.
Something like that.
And you think that that's not the same group who came the last year who had another 7,000 before, so there are probably, 30 or 40,000 people in the city who have seen me at one point or another doing something having to do with my work.
Well, and never mind the other pastors or church ministry leaders from around town that you connect with.
The only people who I think I identify with are the people who work at Costco. Because, you know what I mean? Because there's
everybody
this huge,
knows them.
But yeah, they do. Yeah. There's a big cross section of people who all go there. And they all know the Costco people, but the Costco people don't know them. Yeah. So if they're in a place that's not Costco, the people will look at them like, "What? I know you from somewhere." This happens to me a lot. Yeah. Going to Costco is weird because I've never gone to Costco in Abbotsford and not seen 3 or 4 people who I know, and then others who stare at me, and then I'm like, "Oh, I kind of just nod or whatever at them." And you know what it's like. Thalia, you face the same thing because you're part of a large church here and stuff. I was just at lunch with my wife at Tim Hortons, and this lovely guy from our church came up and he talked to us for several minutes. So you just can't go. No. You have to go outside the town, right, to do that, which is okay because my wife and I are from from the States, from Bellingham and stuff. Although I've been to Bellingham several times. It always seems to be Costco. And then people, hey, Jeff.
Because they're all shopping in Bellingham.
Yeah, totally.
There are some nights where I've said to Mark, you can't make me get out of this house. Because if we go to Starbucks or something, I'm going to see somebody I know and I don't want to talk to anyone tonight.
Yeah.
He's like, but I want to get out of the house. I don't care.
So go for a walk. See ya.
I'm not going. And I'm like, if I go out of the house, I have to be ready because somebody will say,
Yeah, and there's some
"Hey,
places,
you're at
it's
Northview."
lovely. I mean, listen, I'm not complaining about that. I have
Well, a little bit. We can here.
Well, no, I have no problem. I actually have no problem with it. I think it's delightful. I actually like, because I'm not really, one of the challenges that I have as a pastor of a large church is that I actually like knowing the people that I'm speaking to. I like to know their life situation. I like to be connected to people. I love that about New Zealand. We had 300 people in our church and I knew everybody. So I liked it.
So one of the challenges I'll bring up and might be a little bit interesting for you is that people think that way when they see you on stage. They think that you're, very dramatic and charismatic and you speak lively.
I kind of am.
Yeah. But then
Right,
they
like
see
you know me, Thalia.
Totally.
You spend time with me, and if
Totally.
you get to know me, I do. I goof around a lot, and I am pretty boisterous and stuff.
But if
you know
they'd
what?
encounter you in the hallways or at Costco,
they would think, "Whoa, that's different," and he's cold and aloof and,
guy
and
hates
whatever.
yeah. So tell us
Which
a little bit.
I do hate them.
Tell us a little bit about the difference between Jeff on stage and Jeff in the hallways. Why is there this difference? Tell us about that a little
Well,
bit.
the answer is insecurity, probably, or I just I tend to be. It's not insecurity. I'm just not.
Introverted,
I'm just
I
not
think.
massively gregarious person. Just if I don't know you, yeah, I'm not. Yeah. If I feel comfortable with you though, and especially if you like to goof around like I do, we'll be instant friends. Yeah, and
so
the people,
smaller groups like
and
work a little bit
the
better.
people who enjoy a little bit of ribbing or
Yeah.
like to laugh at this or that. I mean, I find myself immediately drawn to, and I end up. It's like if I go on a retreat or whatever and I meet somebody and I don't know them very well, but after the first meal they're making fun of this or that about me or other things, I'm like, oh, we're gonna be buddies. Just because and that's what I'm like. I enjoy being playful.
So people expect that after the sermons, you might want to hang out in the hallway because that's sort of typically thought of as what pastors do.
It's hard for me.
Right. So tell us about that. Why is it hard for you? Why don't you choose to do that so often?
When I did do it in the past, because I have to preach several times on the weekend, I found the third service I actually was mentally exhausted to the point where I was having a hard time remembering what I was doing.
Yeah.
So that happened about 3 times in a row. And I decided early on that there's something has to change. And so I looked across my life at the time and thought, what is the thing that is dragging my energy down so much? And it occurred to me that I am not really good with small talk. And so that's really what happens in the hallways. So because I'm not really good at it, I just made the decision that I can be a better use to more people, if I preserve my energy and can preach clear, edifying sermons, and then save the small talk and discussions and chatter and stuff like that for other occasions, whether it's around town or in smaller group settings or at the men's ministry or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Or at the leaders' breakfast or all that kind of stuff. I'd rather do that.
And I think that's really driven our value on having a venue pastor, as we call them, somebody in that room who's there all the time as a consistent face, so that you don't have to answer the questions and dialogue, but somebody, in the worship center, it might be Imran or Ron or Paul or whoever can talk with people in the hallways.
Yeah, and I think that, again, this is something that people in smaller churches expect, who are from smaller churches, which, by the way, all of us are, not just on staff, but most people here have not come from massive churches to this massive sized church. Like we're all kind of new at this.
Yeah.
So in the end, we kind of have to figure out what works. But one of the things that's hard is if you come to Northview with an expectation that everything here is going to function like it would at a small church, and then I'm going to know the pastor like I'd know my pastor at the small church, it's just not realistic. And I understand the desire. I also, it's just functionally impossible. And so in the end, we have to figure out how we can best maximize the gifts of lots of different people.
Totally.
So what we try to do, like I'll get emails from people who will be saying like, "Hey, I'd love to get together and meet with you." And if I were really honest with them, I would say, "You actually don't want to meet with me." Like I would love to get together. When I was a young adults pastor here, yeah, absolutely. I sit down with them. When I was all the other times I've ever been in ministry, it's like, yeah, absolutely, let's get together. And I'll listen and do counseling and weddings and funeral. I've done all that stuff. But if I say yes to that, it's going to have these effects. Number one, it's going to keep me away from doing the things, the leadership stuff, because it's a large church, right? I have to be involved in lots of different leadership decisions regarding the church here, the training of lots of different kinds of people, and the preparing of sermons, and the connection outside the church with our denomination and other pastors in the community, and trying to push forward an idea of church planting and involvement, all those things. All of that's going to have to wait. Secondly, I'm also taking something significant from you, Thaleia, because you're better at that than I am. You're better in that room than I am.
Well, that's my path.
You are, and
that's my zone.
You're much better across the table from somebody. Paul's better at it, and Vic's better at it, and several pastors are better at it. I can do it, but I'd rather have you there and me in the pulpit. Yeah. Because let's just play to our strengths.
Yeah.
And so in the end, I would be
taking... It's the gift of a large church, right?
It is.
You can play to your strengths.
But in order to make sure that you have that job, I have to say no to things, which on the front end frustrates people. But our pastoral staff is so gifted and capable that when I talk to someone, they say, "Oh, I contacted your office and you couldn't meet with me for a year," which is probably right. And my response is, "Yeah, you were fortunate."
Yeah.
Because ultimately the person that you met with, one of our pastors was a care pastor, if you had a missions idea, like whatever, Ezra, whoever it is that you're meeting with, is a better person for you to meet with than me. Yeah. And I would love to, believe me, it's not a matter of me wanting to not know you. I've actually wanted for years to host a young adult community group, which I still might, but Andy doesn't let me.
Yeah, because you have a bit on your plate,
but
Jeff.
No, but I'd love it. That's actually totally up my alley.
There's lots of things you'd love.
That's totally up my alley.
I know, but you can't do everything
Josh,
you love.
I'm doing it.
Okay, perfect. I call dibs on being in it. So.
Yeah, but no, like it. I'd love to. We did it for years when I was a young adult. I loved it. I loved doing leadership development, and knowing all the people. And I actually think young adults are some of my favorite people in the world, just because of how their whole lives are in front of them, and they largely look like deer in headlights. It's great, and they
feel like it too.
So if someone wants to interact with you about something you've said in a sermon, what's the best way to do that?
You can do it by email, or you can do it. You can send a note here to the podcast, or actually you can. I mean, we can interact over email. I'm able to answer some. Sometimes I hand those to some of our pastoral interns, which is really great practice for them interacting, right?
Totally,
with theological questions and stuff. If it's a personal issue and stuff, I will read it and usually respond. But then, I kind of play quarterback. Me and Val Bosch, who's the executive assistant here, she'll play quarterback. I mean, I'll read the stuff, and we will decide together. Okay, that needs to go to Thaleia, or that needs to go to Vic, or that needs to go to Paul or Kyle or
Andy or whoever.
Whoever it is, who's going to be more capable of having a longer term conversation about that than I would.
A little piece in there might be helpful for our listeners is that you don't actually get all your emails first. Val reads them all first, so that you are not swamped with things, and so that there's some filtering.
And I get a lot, I get a lot of positive stuff on my email, but I also get a lot of really negative stuff on my email. And so I just, as a general rule, we have a filter. Yeah. I used to get some emails on Saturday nights, and it would crush me for Sunday. Yeah. And so in the end, I thought, that's not really helpful. Yeah. Like, there are a group of people who give me significant feedback about my preaching and particular sermons. And if they think there's an issue, and by the way, I'm not saying, hey, just speak up if you have an issue. I ask their opinion after it. Okay, was that okay? Did I need to fix it? Do I need to change? There's like 5 or 6 people who I will ask those questions to. And then they will give me significant feedback. If they say, I don't think this part was really as helpful as it could be, can you clarify that? Yeah. And I'll do work on that to make sure that it's better for the next time.
That's good.
So I'm also my worst critic. Like, I wouldn't cross the street to hear me preach. So in the end, I hear all the flaws.
People would be surprised by that.
Well, I hear all the flaws.
Yeah, sure.
In all this stuff.
Sure.
And I chastise myself after the fact and say, you were not clear there, or that illustration wasn't quite as helpful as it should have been. But I spent a lot of
Yeah.
time trying.
Absolutely. But that's normal. Like,
Yeah.
I do that too. And I come out of a counseling session, I'm like,
Totally.
I didn't explain
shoulda
that
said
clearly.
that.
And I should have said that. And I thought about this
No, that's
now.
right. This is
and,
what most people are like, though. If you whatever employment you're in, the thing that you find your joy in and the thing you're good at, you tend to be very harsh with yourself when you don't do it as well as you think you should. Yeah.
So how can people support you and your family
Well, you
at
can pray.
Northview?
You can pray for us. Yeah, that's the biggest way.
Yeah.
You can pray for us. Also understand, I suppose, if there's anything I ever want people to understand is that, churches that grow like ours, oftentimes the people who are in leadership of them didn't expect this either.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
And so, I can see how my gifts are suitable for a church, for a larger church. I
Yeah.
can see that. But at the same time, the fishbowl feeling and all of that stuff that comes with it is not something that, it's a providence in our lives that we didn't expect. And
Yeah.
I'm in no way complaining about it because I thank God for what he's done and has done. And everybody's got challenges with whatever blessings the Lord brings along too, right? But also, it is nice, though, to know that some people do understand and are gracious. And this is kind of my big preaching point for all of us. Most of the people in our lives, need grace.
Yeah.
And I mean, need grace to be who they are. There are lots of things that they're doing that are not sin, right?
Yep.
But it's okay for them to do that. The school debates and it's okay. You send your kids to the school you want, homeschool, private. I don't care. You do what you need to do, and you need to know that I'm on your side with that decision. I believe that that's the best decision for you and your family.
Yeah, there's freedoms there.
It's not my thing. So in the end, I just think that a lot of people are facing difficulties in their workplaces and challenges that I don't know anything about when it comes to some of that. And for me to assume, well, why is it that they do this? It's a bit arrogant on my part because I'm not walking in their shoes and I don't know what it's like. And so in the end, there's an old saying, there's always another factor in someone else's case about which you know nothing. And that's been helpful to me.
Yeah.
And I would like most of us to view that. The church is at its best when we are serious about the serious things. But we have all sorts of freedoms for people who are in different states and challenges and all sorts of things like that.
So when we run into you at Costco or Starbucks,
Yeah, you should say hi.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How else do you like people to interact with you?
Can't believe we're talking about this. Stay at a distance of 5 feet and only use I'm not the
You got a chance now. You
I'm
can tell
not
people,
the Costco Nazi. Are you kidding?
but it can
Stop
look
it.
it can
No.
look like it.
Just
No talk for
hug
you.
Jeff. Hug Jeff as soon as you see him.
No.
Yeah, don't hug him.
No. Just like any other person. I like people to say hi. I love it. I do think it's hard to remember everybody's name because, if I meet somebody, this, if you meet somebody, you'll meet somebody once and then you won't see them for 8 months.
Yeah.
And you'll know their face.
Yes.
And you'll be like, oh,
Where do I know
but
you
I
from?
don't know
And-
your
Yeah.
name. So I find myself, I hate the fact that I have to say,
I'm so sorry.
Please
I've forgotten your name.
remind me
Yeah.
of your name.
Yeah. I
And
wish
then
we
they're-
could do that over and
then
over
they're
and
like,
over again.
And then they're like, well, my name's so-and-so and I shared this thing with you. And then it floods back to my memory. Like, that's right.
Yes.
You did.
Uh-huh.
And how is such and such?
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'll be halfway through a conversation
Yeah.
and this happened. I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that there's several times around town I've been in conversations with somebody and I've been looking at them and they were talking about an issue and I'm like, this
What is
sounds
their
really
name?
familiar.
I know.
This situation, and then
I know.
halfway through the conversation, I almost have to hide it because I'm like,
know.
it's like light comes on. I'm like, oh, I remember everything about this,
I know.
and I know who. Yes,
Yes.
and you, but you can't say that out loud.
No.
Oh, this whole time before this, I've been faking it.
I know.
And now I figured
there's
it
like a line that you cross. You have to introduce yourself like at the beginning. If you cross that line and you haven't done that,
Yeah.
there's a point where you can't ask for their
Yeah.
name.
Yeah,
Like it's really
and
hard.
again, it's a function of the work, and in the same way, it's a function of like somebody's at Costco or somebody who's kind of in a more public, who's seen by lots of different people. Yeah, it's just a function of that. And so in the end, it's helpful for. I do that now with people either in ministry or in, I've done that with some people who work at Costco before or at the border.
Yeah,
There's a guy at the border who's like, you probably don't remember me. I'm Jeff. Like, oh, okay, yeah. Because I see you every time when we go across the border, but you don't remember the individuals who are coming through.
Josh, we're going to have to schedule part 2 with Jeff because I've got more questions that didn't get answered today. So
I got some good seminary questions for you.
So next time, Jeff, well, actually not next time, probably in a few weeks or something like that. Maybe in the spring. I don't know. At some point, we're going to do part 2 with Jeff.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Thanks for listening today.